Okay, everybody, we are starting session number 7. And we'll start off with Ms. Anastasia Petrova of the Institute of Oriental Studies of the Russian Academy of Sciences, talking about the Zoku Honchō Ōjōden and the history of Pure Land Buddhism. Please go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Is it okay? So, first of all, I would like to thank all the organizers for this opportunity to be here. I'm very happy to present you this text, which I try to study right now. So, the text I would like to present is called Zoku Honchō Ōjōden, which can be roughly translated as continuation of the biographies of Japanese reborn into the Pure Land. This text was compiled by Oeno Masafusa. Here you see the dates of his life, so roughly 11th to 12th century. And this text was composed as a sequel to Nihon Jo Gokurakki, or Japanese Records of Rebirth in the Land of Supreme Joy, which was written by Yoshishige no Yasutane a little bit earlier, about a century earlier. This text, of course, is more famous. I think everybody knows it, because this is the first text of this kind. I mean, the genre of the text. So both texts belong to the genre which is called Ōjōden. So what is it? Ōjōden, something like biographical sketches of believers who have attained rebirth in the Pure Land of Amida Buddha. So, and on the picture you can see the first introductory page. Unfortunately, I tried to find different variants of the text, all the variants, and all I managed to find was not earlier than Edo period. So the earliest one could be from 17th century. The exact date of this text, which is presented here, is unknown, but I guess it's Edo period anyway. So in his introduction, Oeno Masafusa states that more than 100 years have passed since Yoshishige no Yasutane created Nihon Jo Gokurakki, and during this period, such cases of rebirth were also numerous. That's why, says Oeno Masafusa, that's why I searched through the whole country up to the people of the lowest status, and have collected examples that escaped the attention of previous records, as well as those that happened after them. So according to the introduction, the text was composed during the Kowa period. This means Kowa period ends in 1104, but as one of the biographies mentions an event that happened on the 3rd year of Kowa, this means 1101. We should conclude that the text was composed between 1101 and 1111, because it's the date of Oeno Masafusa's death. And the text is written in Kanbun, which is not surprising, of course. So some 2 more pages of the text, that's random pages that just to show the text. So the structure of the Zoku Honchō Ōjōden resembles that of Nihon Jo Gokurakki. Here you can see the comparative table, Nihon Jo Gokurakki and the Zoku Honchō Ōjōden. So the text contains 42 biographies, the same as with Nihon Jo Gokurakki. 42 biographies of people who lived, for those people who are whose dates of living is known little by little. They all lived in from 9th to 11th century. And all these biographies are arranged in the following order. First, biographies of emperors, Emperor Ichijo, Emperor Go-Sanjo, 2 of them. Then the biographies of high nobility, 3 of them, Minister Horikawa, Akimoto, and Oe-no Tondo. Then the biggest parts of the text, just the same as in Nihon no Jogo Kuraki, biggest part of the text contains the biographies of monks, 25 of them. And then at the end goes the biographies of laymen, and then biographies of women, both nuns and lay women. So most of the monks are Tendai monks. If the school is clearly stated, when it is stated that it's the monk from Tendai school. So it is not surprising, because we know that it was Tendai school that began to incorporate elements of the Pure Land teaching into their practices. Most of these monks, which are mentioned in the text, have many connections with Ryogen, and especially Ryogen in temple of Yokawa of Hiei mountain. And this is also interesting and not surprising, because that's a place where in the year 986, a group of monks formed Niju Go Sanmae, 25 Samadhi Society, a religious association for mutual assistance in their practice to achieve birth in Pure Land. And this event, I mean, the foundation of Niju Sanmae, is considered to be one of the milestones in the formation of a Japanese Pure Land tradition. And another 2 major events are the completion of Nihon no Jogo Kuraki, which is mentioned here, and the second one is the completion of Ōjōyōshu, written by Genshin. Ōjōyōshu, or the Essentials of Rebirth in the Pure Land, if I had to translate it. And as an investigator, as Robert Rhodes has stated, the work of Genshin found the theoretical outline for Pure Land Buddhism, something like a grand theory about the Pure Land, while Yoshishige no Yasutare created a narrative, a model, because he attempted to prove that the Pure Land really exists by presenting stories of people who through certain science, could be verified as having gone into Amida's realm at death. So both Genshin and Yoshishige no Yasutane have their biographies in Zoku Honchō Ōjōden. So in other words, we can consider Zoku Honchō Ōjōden as a work that is not only a sequel to Nihon no Jogo Kuraki, but also a development of ideas expressed by Genshin in his works, especially in Ōjōyōshu. So some words about the structure of each biography, because each biography have nearly the same structure, and it resembles, of course, the biographies which we meet in Nihon no Jogo Kuraki. Each biography mentions first the origin of the person. For laymen, parents and titles are mentioned, and for monks, usually not so many monks which parents are known, but for monks usually mentioned the temples of their origin, their teachers, and sometimes school to which they belong. If it's mentioned, normally it's Tendai school, as I have already said. Second part of the biography lists talents and achievements of the person, and this could be quite secular ones, as some achievements in poetry, for example, or some secular career of the person. But of course, for monks, it's the career on the Buddhist path. It's also quite common. And of course, the very important part of the text is the part that describes the commitment to the path of the believer, of the biography's person, the person which biography we can read in the text. So yes, his commitment to the path, and his commitment to especially the future birth into the Pure Land, as well as the actions taken to achieve it. So it's a little bit earlier. So the final part which is very essential. The final part of each biography is a description of the final hours of the person, and as well as the signs of his rebirth, which is he was clearly really rebirthed in the realm of the Amidas, realm of the Amida. So there are many practices that are mentioned in the stories as being performed during one's lifetime, intended to show one's strong devotion to Pure Land, as well as deathbed practices. The description of a death hour is a crucial point of every biography, and I have to state this because this is more important. I mean, death hour and the practices performed during this important hour is more important than this commitment to the path during the life of the person. Some of these practices belong to the Pure Land tradition, and the most important to be mentioned is, of course, Nembutsu, a recollection of the Buddha Amida, and to show you how important is this, I can tell you the numbers. So this term appears in 29 of 42 stories. But of course, it's not everything that is mentioned. It's the most important, the most numerous, but sometimes the text mentions also something like Saiho no Gyo, practices of the West, but only 2 mentions actually. Jodo no Gyo, Pure Land practices, also about 2 mentions. And also in the story of Oi no Takachika, it is said he had built a pavilion and practicing a ritual of greeting. So, of course, we should not put in doubt that on the which ritual of greeting is meant. Of course, it's Mukaya Ko, although the text doesn't call it exactly this term, doesn't use exactly this term, but I think it is mentioned. That is okay. So these practices can be called as belonging to the Pure Land tradition, but not only these rites, not only these rituals are mentioned, because there are a lot of others which are more likely to be attributed to different traditions. And the most important is reading and reciting of Lotus Sutra, which is mentioned in 10 biographies. Of course, the author obviously does not feel any need to draw a line between between Pure Land practices and other practices. It's of course, it is not surprising because Lotus Sutra, for example, is fundamental for Tendai school. And from the time of Ryogen in Enryakuji temple, Nenbutsu became conceptually paired with the ritual called Hokke Senbo, or Lotus Repentance Rite, which centers on Lotus Sutra recitation and purification of the 6 sense organs as a form of repentance. This means that for people of the time, reciting of Lotus Sutra was nearly at the same level as Nenbutsu for attaining rebirth in the Pure Land. So, and of course, other practices that are mentioned in the text, among them reciting of different harani, reading of different other sutras, and other practices, but well, they are not mentioned. The mentions are not very numerous. I mean, once, twice, not more. But anyway, they are mentioned. Zazen, the Toso practice, Zange, repentance practice, Gachirinkan, and so on. I should state that this practice, they are only mentioned, they are not discussed in details. For example, what the person should do when he or she performs Nenbutsu. Now he or she only performs Nenbutsu, and that's all. No details. Only once we really have a detail about Otsugi, biography number 37. It is written that that day he hung a bell on his neck and was practicing Nenbutsu going around the room. That's the only detailed expression, the only detailed description of Nenbutsu. And going to the death hour, a lot of practices is mentioned during the death hour, but the most important thing I have to stress is that for Oeno Masafusu was important to underline the state of mind of the deceased, because so many terms in almost every biography underlines this fact. That, the most important term, which is the most numerals, is this shonen, which describes the right state of mind. And I should stress that this term is not mentioned in Nihon no Jogo Kuraki, for example, only in Zoku Honchō Ōjōden. But there are a number of other terms which also stress and underlines this state of mind of the deceased. So, for example, he should read the Nenbutsu, Furan without confusion, Shin with concentration, Fudan uninterrupted, Fukai tirelessly, Ishin with one's whole heart. So, yes, this is the most important point because it's the main feature of the text. Because if we compare it with Nihon no Jogo Kuraki, we can see that in Nihon no Jogo Kuraki, the most important part is this. Many is written about practices performed during lifetime, and much emphasis is laid on the science of rebirth. While in Zoku Honchō Ōjōden, it seems that the most important part is the death hour of the death and his or her state of mind. So not very important, not so much is written about these practices, and not every story contains a science of rebirth. So you can see this last line that sometimes it is enough to say that people say that he attained rebirth, and that's enough. Not one or two biographies which show no signs of rebirth at all. This line is enough. But this is very important. For me, it's not surprising because I should say that in his work, Oeno Masafusu leans on the idea expressed in Genshin's Ojo-yoshu, that it is the last moment of life that is decisive and determines one's rebirth. And he should illustrate this idea with examples. So as I already said, this is important that Oeno Masafusu continues not only Yoshishige no Yasutane's work, but he also continues the ideas of Genshin. In conclusion, I should say that this text is important because it presents Pure Land tradition in development. So Nihon no Jogo Kuraki was the first text of that kind. Its creator can be called the founder. He was a person which was inside the inner circle. While Zoku Honchō Ōjōden gives us the idea of how this tradition evolved. That's why it is important. This is a tradition that started from Rogen, Genshin, and their circle. And it's clear that Oeno Masafusu expects his readers to know what is it all about, because he explains nothing. None of his practices is explained. So we can consider that he is a person also inside this tradition, inside this inner circle. The circle is not very wide, maybe, because circle goes from Rogen through Genshin and Yoshishige no Yasutane and some Tendai monks. Oeno Masafusu doesn't need to explain anything. He doesn't need to stress evidences of rebirth. But he needs to underline for his readers the importance of these deathbed practices. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. We certainly have a few minutes. So if there are any questions, are there any questions here in the room? No questions in the room. Online, perhaps? I can't see online. Please raise your hand if you have a question. Professor van der Wallen has a question.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. I missed the very beginning of it, but so maybe my question relates to the initial phrases of your presentation. But I was wondering to what extent these writings, the Zoku Honchō Ōjōden and similar writings, followed a pattern established by Chinese Kōsōden. So in China, you have at around 530 during the Liang dynasty, you have the Kōsōden, Kaosheng Zhuan by Hui Jiao. Then around 650, the Zoku Kōsōden in the Japanese pronunciation by Dosen. You have the So Kōsōden, the Sung Kaosheng Zhuan, so the eminent monks from the Sung, and then also of the Ming, but of course this is irrelevant for the Japanese development, but especially the early one, the Kōsōden, the Kaosheng Zhuan, which was completed around 630, set a pattern. And I was wondering to what extent this pattern, because this was like a kind of genre, this pattern was actually duplicated, and in what way and where it deviated from the original pattern, because of course this was really connected to or concentrated on Pure Land, whereas the Chinese was much more comprehensive, first of all. Secondly, this was written by people, like Oeno Masafusa, people with a different background, not purely monastic background. So I would suspect that there is also quite some influence from the cultural background of the writers that sets these writings apart from the Chinese example. This is just a thing that occurred to me, but probably it could be interesting to explore for you, but maybe you have already done it. So that's why I just bring it up.
Thank you. I don't hear very well, but I get the idea about the Chinese ancestor of the genre. Yes. Yes, it is important, of course. When I said about the founder of the genre, I meant, of course, well, in Japan. Of course, you are right that the Chinese ancestor of the genre are very important and should.
But there must also be, I think, quite an important difference, a deviation. So what interests me is what is more or less continuation and what is new, because both elements must be there. You see what I mean?
I can't hear.
Oh, sorry.
Properly.
I wonder whether this is my connection which is wrong or yours.
Yeah, I cannot answer this question because I need to study Chinese text first. I haven't done it yet.
Well, yeah, I don't know whether you have to study the Chinese text first. I suppose that reading and some research on the Chinese text will be sufficient for your purpose, so that you can put it in a bigger and a broader context. I don't think you really have to start studying the Chinese text as well, but it would be interesting. I think, at one point you have to look at this aspect, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I have to look at this aspect and I hope to do it in the future.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For your presentation.
Other questions? No hands? No hands so far. I was wondering myself, I'm not into Buddhist studies, but what were the criteria for selection of people into the biography? There were monks, there were laymen, especially laymen and lay women. Why were they incorporated? How were they selected? Because I think there were hundreds of them and only a few are selected.
This is a very interesting question and very hard to be answered because most of them are monks. So maybe, as I can imagine, some people which are told by other people that they were reborn. So he just tried to collect this, well, maybe this, maybe a little bit at random, I think. So, but it is very hard to answer because which sources can it be to answer this question? I don't know.
So there were no criteria. Well, you don't know.
It's hard to see which criteria the Oeno Masafusu, for example, used. But he, of course, most of them are monks, but not only monks, laymen and laywomen also. And it was important for him, I think, to show that not only monks can attain rebirth, but also laymen and also women can. It is important, I think. So I think he was trying hard to find these people.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions? No more questions? Then we conclude this. Thank you very much.